This next chapter, chapter 9, is about 360 VR. And it's actually a key point here in this course because this is the first part of the project that you have to do, is also to create an environment based on 360 photos. So this chapter, I think, will help you set up at least part of the code for that. Some of the sections in this chapter, I'll go quickly about them because there's really not much to explain, and then you can just read on your own pace afterwards if you are interested. Other sections I will go a bit slower and I will demonstrate because they are a bit harder to actually to explain, and I really need to demonstrate some of the things here. Although also for some of the things I have uploaded videos and linked them here in the chapter, so that if for some reason you don't quite follow my demonstration today, then you can just re-watch the movies in YouTube. So the first thing to know about 360 virtual reality or 360 environments in A-frame is that we can actually use more than one format for the pictures that we take of a real environment. So there are various formats, but perhaps the most common ones are the ones that you already know. So the one we have been using, which is called equirectangular format and a cube map format. And you can see here in these pictures that the main difference about these formats. So the first one is basically turning a sphere into a plane. And the second one is basically you put the user inside the cube. Instead of putting the user inside a sphere, you put the user inside the cube, and so you have 6 faces inside that cube that you have to texture. And this is a representation of a cube map format. They might have slightly different ways of specifying each face for the cube, but so this would be one possibility. So a large part of the picture is actually empty because we just need the 6 faces of the cube. The most in A-frame, the one that is natively supported is the first one, so the equirectangular one. So that's the one that I usually use, and the one that I suggest that you use also. You can use the cube map format, but for this you need to use a component, an external component that supports this kind of projection. Now, one of the main things is how do we get 360 photos? And actually there are lots of ways of getting hold of 360 photographs. One of the easiest ways, if you want to take the photograph yourself, is to use a 360 camera. And there are now lots of cameras, the cheap cameras available that do this. So you just basically you point and click. You press a button on the camera and it takes a 360 photo. And then you just need to download to your computer. Sometimes, depending on the camera, you need to take the picture through software to convert it to this equirectangular format, but that depends on the camera itself. And actually, when you have the opportunity to get back to the university campus, the university, so FCI has at least 2 of these, 2 cameras, I forgot the brand now that they have, but they have two 360 cameras that you can use. Another alternative, if you really want to take professional pictures, is to use a professional camera. This is a bit harder. I mean, professional and high quality pictures, because these 360 cameras, the quality of the picture is not always very good. So the resolution might not be very good. You can take 360 photos with DSLR cameras, but this is a bit harder to do, because with a camera like this, then you need to take several photos all around you, and then you need to stitch those photographs together. So you need to use software that takes all those different photos with different perspectives and stitches them together, makes a composition with all those photos. Another difficulty with these professional cameras is that in order for the 360 photo to be really well taken, then you need a special head for the camera to place the camera. So you can do this with a common tripod on your camera. So it needs a special head that allows the camera to rotate exactly on the point where the sensor is located. And for this you need a kind of a special head that needs first to be calibrated so that you adjust the rotation point to be exactly on the sensor of the camera. But if you have this kind of hardware and you have the time, of course, to set up the thing, then it really gives you very good results. So if you like photography and if you have one of these cameras, then it might be a possibility. I won't show you, but I left a link here for a YouTube video, and you can find several of these that I think shows you the setup of these cameras. So it gives you an example of what would be needed to take a 360 photo. Another possibility that we saw just today is that you could just generate a 360 photo from a virtual environment. If you already have a virtual environment in A-frame, then you can just take a screenshot with that shortcut keys that I talked about, and then you have a 360 photo that you can use somewhere else. Another possibility is simply to download. There are lots of sites that now provide you with 360 photos. Flickr, for example, is one of those sites. And if you just Google 360 photos, you'll find lots of images that you can use. So many of them have kind of very open licenses that allow you to use the pictures for any purposes. A final possibility, and the one that I think might be particularly well suited for the project, is this last one. So another possibility is to download 360 photos from Google Street View. So you know, Google Street View has panoramic pictures of many locations on Earth. They even now have many indoor places also mapped. So we can just try taking 360 photos from that system. Now, of course, the quality of the photo is not always very good. You noticed If you use Google Street View, often you notice where the stitching of the pictures occurred, so the picture is kind of distorted. But it's still okay for our project. It would be okay. It's not a professional looking 360 photo, but I think it's good enough. One way to download 360 photos from Google Street View, because they don't provide this functionality directly, but there is an application that you can use to download these photographs. And it's basically through a desktop application, along with searching for the location on Google Street View first, and then copying that URL to another website that will give you an ID, the ID of the 360 photo, and then you can use that to download. So it seems kind of complicated process, but it's really not. It's really easy. And again, I won't show you the video right now, the process, because I think it's really, it's easy. It's just following a couple of steps. But I've made a video that shows you all the steps that you need to take to download a 360 photo from Google Street View. So you can just, the video is embedded right here in the chapter, so you can just then later on watch it. And one thing that we can do with 360 photos, for example, in many situations when we use a 360 camera to take the photo, one of the problems is that the tripod where the camera is usually in, because most of these photos are taken while the camera is resting on a tripod. Of course, you can also hold the camera in your hand and just take a screenshot, a photograph, but then you yourself will appear in the photo. And we don't want that, so we put the camera on the tripod, we get away from the view of the camera, usually hiding behind someplace, because the camera takes a picture in every direction. And then you just press a button on the remote control, usually your smartphone, to make the camera take the photo. But the tripod always appears on the photo. So one of the things that we usually do is to edit the photo in some photo editing software. And that's one of the nice things about 360 photos, is that they are actually just regular images, so you can edit them in any photo editing software. And here's a video that shows you that. So and it actually shows Photoshop being used for this, and Photoshop has actually some specific functionality for dealing with 360 photos, which makes it a bit easier. So you could also, if you really need to, you could also apply this editing thing to photos that you took from, for example, from Google Street View or from some other location. So there's always the possibility of editing the photos before using them in A-frame. Of course, this might be a bit time consuming, so you'll have to decide if the thing that you want to correct is severe enough to warrant the time that it will take you to correct it. Now, after you have the photos, then we need to add the photo to A-frame. We already saw how to do this in some previous examples. And basically, most often we just apply it in A-frame by using the A-sky element. And then we texture that sky with the 360 photo that we have uploaded to the assets. Now, I just want, before we move on, I just wanted to tell you a bit more about this A-sky element and what it does. So basically, an A-sky creates a sphere geometry. So in terms of geometry, it's simply a sphere. And in the current version of A-frame, it's a sphere with 500 meters in diameter, in radius. So with a diameter of 1 kilometer. And by default, of course, it's centered. So the sphere is centered at the origin, 0, 0, 0. And it's visible only from the inside. So it has that attribute, that side attribute set to back. So because the front of a sphere is typically the outside of it. It's important that the sphere has this very large radius because this will make sure that even if you slightly change your perspective, your head perspective inside that photosphere, you won't really notice anything strange because you'll need to make a very, very large movement for it to be visible or apparent to you that the perspective inside the photosphere changed. So remember that when we use 360 photos, the photo itself is taken from a single perspective, a single point in space. And so it is only correctly seen from one specific point in space also. So it doesn't make much sense to use a 360 photo and then allow the user to navigate through the environment. Although if he only does small movements and there's nothing else in the environment, it won't be a big deal. But if a user is allowed to move, let's say 100 meters, then he might see something weird going on. So maybe actually I can try showing you this effect that I was mentioning instead of just describing. Let me see if I can change this example here and so that we can see what I was talking about. So let's change this first example, this chapter. So the way to prevent a user from moving around inside an environment is by using this attribute. It has a weird name inside the camera element, but it basically is telling us that the WASD controls, which are the controls to move forward, back, and to the sides, they are disabled. So if we re-enable those controls, then we will allow the user to move inside the environment. And so we can obviously always rotate about, but now I will change. I'm pressing those WASD keys on my keyboard, and you notice what's happening. So this environment is not just a 360 photo. Let me move here. So if we just have a 360 photo and we move a bit, and I'm moving right now, you notice that nothing changes because we are just moving a few meters, and a few meters in 1 kilometer, which is the diameter of this sphere, it's not much. So you don't notice anything. I'm going to reload this. Now, the problem arises, and it's really, really noticeable when, besides the 360 photo, we have other artificial elements like boxes or cylinders or wherever. So if we insert 3D objects inside the photosphere, then now we have the photosphere all around us and 3D objects like this one in front of us. Now, if the user is allowed to move inside this environment, look what happens. I'm going to move forward. So as we move forward, obviously the objects will become closer to us. Now I'm going to move back. So the object, the box is moving away from me. And I could move to the sides also. The problem is the object is moving relative to, appears to be moving relative to the photosphere. And this doesn't make much sense. It's weird. So that's why in this kind of environment, we usually prevent the user from moving around, because these things would happen. And they are strange. They really break the sense of presence in the environment. Notice that the relative position of the box to the sphere doesn't actually change. As we move, only the camera, the perspective of the user, is changing. But the relative position of the photosphere and the box are not changing. But because our perspective is, then it appears that the box is moving relative to the photosphere. And in this case, that we wanted kind of to create the illusion that the box was resting on top of this table inside the classroom, as we move, the illusion just breaks. So this is why it's really important to have this attribute in the camera element for 360 environments.